Have you ever noticed that there is a voice inside your head that never stops talking? It speaks to you from the moment you wake until the moment you sleep, and sometimes even in your dreams. This voice has opinions about everything you do, everything you say, and everything you are. It tells you when you are good enough and when you are not. It compares you to others, judges your choices, and often finds you lacking in some way. Most people believe this voice is who they are. They think this constant commentary is their own thinking, their own wisdom, their own truth. But what if I told you that this voice is not you at all? What if this voice that seems so familiar, so much a part of you, is actually a collection of other people's opinions and beliefs that have taken up residence in your mind? This voice I speak of is what we might call the inner judge. It is the part of you that learned to criticize and evaluate everything, including yourself. It learned this behavior so well that it now does it automatically without your permission and often without your awareness. Like a radio that plays in the background, this voice provides a constant soundtrack to your life, and much of what it plays creates suffering. The inner judge is not your enemy, though it may feel that way. It is simply a program that was installed in your mind when you were very young, when you had no choice but to accept what others told you about yourself and about life. This program runs automatically now, like software on a computer, creating the same patterns of thought over and over again. When you begin to notice this voice, you may be surprised by how harsh it can be. You may discover that you speak to yourself in ways you would never speak to someone you love. You criticize yourself for mistakes, judge yourself for imperfections, and punish yourself for not living up to standards that may not, or even be your own. This inner judge has become so familiar that you may not even question whether what it tells you is true. But here is what I want you to understand. This voice that judges you so harshly is not the voice of truth. It is not the voice of wisdom. It is not the voice of love. It is simply the voice of conditioning, the voice of all the beliefs and opinions you absorbed from others when you were too young to know any better. Every thought this judge thinks, every criticism it makes, every standard it holds you to came from somewhere else. It came from parents who were trying their best, but were themselves carrying the wounds of their own conditioning. It came from teachers who were passing on what they had learned, often without questioning whether it was helpful or true. It came from a society that has its own agreements about what makes a person worthy, successful, or lovable. Think of a small child, perhaps 3 or 4 years old. This child is naturally joyful, creative, and free. The child does not judge their own laughter as too loud or their imagination as silly. They do not compare themselves to other children and find themselves lacking. They simply are in each moment expressing their authentic nature without apology or hesitation. Your true voice has been there all along, like a song playing softly in another room, waiting for you to remember how to listen. To hear this voice, you must create space for it. You must quiet the constant chatter of judgment and criticism long enough to notice the deeper wisdom that lives within you. You must stop believing that the loudest voice is the truest voice and begin to listen for the voice that speaks with love. Your authentic voice knows things that the judge cannot know. It knows what brings you joy, what feeds your soul, what makes you feel alive and connected and real. It knows your gifts, your passions, your unique way of seeing and being in the world. It knows the difference between what you truly want and what you think you should want. This voice has been trying to guide you all along, but it speaks in whispers while the judge speaks in shouts. It speaks through feelings of inspiration, moments of clarity, sudden knowing that comes not from thinking, but from a deeper place of wisdom. It speaks through your body, through sensations of expansion when you move toward what is true for you and contraction when you move away from it. Learning to trust this voice requires courage because it may ask you to live differently than you have been living. It may ask you to honor your needs, express your truth, follow your heart even when others do not understand. It may ask you to disappoint some people in order to be authentic to yourself. The judge fears this voice because it knows that when you begin to listen to your authentic wisdom, you will no longer need its harsh guidance. You will have access to a more reliable compass, one that points not toward perfection but toward truth, not toward what others expect but toward what your soul knows. Your authentic voice does not speak in absolutes or ultimatums. It does not demand immediate and dramatic changes. It simply invites you, moment by moment, to choose authenticity over performance, truth over appearance, love over fear. It asks you to be real rather than right, to be yourself rather than who you think you should be. This voice knows that you came into this world with gifts that only you can give, with a perspective that only you can offer, with a love that only you can express. It knows that the world needs who you really are, not who you think you should be. It knows that your authenticity is not selfishness but service, not indulgence but contribution. The judge lives in time, always focused on the past or the future, but never present to what is happening right now. It dwells on mistakes you made yesterday, last week, last year, telling you stories about what these mistakes mean about who you are. It worries about what might happen tomorrow, next week, next year, creating elaborate scenarios of failure and disappointment. But here is what the judge cannot see. Life only happens in this moment. Love only exists in this moment. Peace only lives in this moment. Joy only flows in this moment. The past is memory, the future is imagination, but reality is always now. When you are fully present, when your attention is completely here in this moment, the judge has no power over you. It cannot make you feel guilty about the past because the past is not here. It cannot make you anxious about the future because the future is not here. It can only operate when your mind is somewhere else, when you are not present to the truth of this moment. In this moment, right now, you are not your mistakes. You are not your failures. You are not your inadequacies or your imperfections. You are not the stories you tell yourself about who you are or what you deserve. You are simply here, alive, aware, breathing, being. In this moment, you do not need to be anything other than what you are. You do not need to prove anything, achieve anything, become anything. You simply are, and this simple being is enough. It is more than enough. It is everything. The judge tries to steal your attention away from this moment because it knows that in presence, its voice becomes meaningless. All the stories it tells, all the criticism it offers, all the fears it generates become like clouds passing through an empty sky when you are truly here, truly present, truly awake to what is. Presence is not something you have to create or manufacture. It is your natural state. It is what remains when you stop trying to be somewhere else, someone else, something else. It is what you find when you stop running from this moment and allow yourself to simply be here. When you practice presence, you discover that this moment is not the problem you thought it was. Even when this moment contains difficulty, pain, or challenge, it also contains your capacity to meet whatever is here with awareness and love. It contains your resilience, your wisdom, your ability to respond rather than react. The judge tells you that you need to fix yourself, improve yourself, change yourself in order to be happy. But presence reveals that happiness is not found in becoming someone else, but in being fully who you are right now. It is not found in achieving some future state, but in recognizing the completeness that already exists in this moment. In presence, you remember that you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness that notices thoughts. You are not your emotions. You are the space in which emotions arise and pass away. You are not your history. You are the consciousness that is here now, fresh and alive and free. This recognition is not a mental understanding, but a direct experience. When you are present, you feel your own spaciousness, your own peace, your own wholeness. You remember what you are beneath all the stories, all the conditioning, all the programming that you have carried for so long. From this place of presence, you can make a new agreement with yourself. You can choose to treat yourself with the love and respect that is your birthright. You can decide to speak to yourself with kindness, to honor your needs, to trust your wisdom, to celebrate your uniqueness. This new agreement is not based on conditions or requirements. It does not say, I will love myself when I am perfect, or I will accept myself when I have achieved enough. It simply says, I choose to love myself as I am right now in this moment, because love is what I am and love is what I deserve. This agreement recognizes that you are not broken and do not need to be fixed. You are not lacking and do not need to earn your worth. You are not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be lived. Not a project to be completed, but a gift to be unwrapped slowly, lovingly, patiently. Making this new agreement does not mean that you will never again hear the voice of the inner judge. It means that when you hear it, you remember that you have a choice. You can choose to listen to the voice of criticism or the voice of love. You can choose to believe the stories of unworthiness or to remember your inherent value. This agreement is renewed moment by moment, choice by choice, breath by breath. It is not a destination you reach, but a way of traveling. It is not a state you achieve, but a practice you cultivate. It is not perfection, but presence, not completion, but compassion. As you learn to live from this new agreement, you discover that the freedom you have been seeking was always within you. You realize that the love you have been trying to earn was always yours. You remember that the peace you have been chasing was always your natural state. The inner judge that once seemed so powerful, so authoritative, so necessary, begins to lose its grip on your life. Its voice becomes quieter, less frequent, less convincing. You realize that it was never your enemy, but simply a part of you that was afraid, a part that was trying to protect you in the only way it knew how. From this place of understanding, you can even have compassion for the judge itself. You can thank it for its service while gently letting it know that you no longer need its harsh protection. You can acknowledge its fear while choosing to live from love. This is not the end of the journey, but the beginning of a new way of living. It is the start of a life where you treat yourself as you would treat a beloved friend, where you speak to yourself as you would speak to someone you adore, where you honor yourself as you would honor someone you respect deeply. The silence that comes when the inner judge is no longer ruling your life is not empty, but full. It is full of possibility, full of love, full of the quiet joy that comes from being at peace with who you are. In this silence, you remember that you are not the voice that judges, but the awareness that can choose which voice to trust. This awareness is your true self, the self that was there before the conditioning began and will be there long after the programming has dissolved. This awareness is not separate from love, but is love itself, not separate from peace, but is peace itself, not separate from joy, but is joy itself. Rest in this knowing, trust in this truth, live from this place of love. The inner judge may visit from time to time, but it no longer owns the house of your heart. You do. And you have chosen to make it a home where only love is welcome, where only truth is spoken, where only peace abides. But then slowly this natural freedom begins to change. The child learns that some expressions of their authentic self are welcomed and others are not. They learn that love and approval often come with conditions. They discover that to be safe, to be accepted, to belong, they must begin to modify who they are to meet the expectations of others. This is how the inner judge is born. It begins as a survival mechanism, a way for the child to navigate a world where love feels conditional and acceptance must be earned. The judge learns to monitor every word, every action, every thought, always asking, is this acceptable? Will this get me the love I need? Am I being good enough? Over time, this monitoring becomes so automatic that the child, now grown, continues to judge themselves even when no one else is watching. The voice that once helped them survive in a world of conditional love has become a prison that keeps them from experiencing the unconditional love that is their birthright. The parents who participated in this conditioning were not cruel or intentionally harmful. They were simply passing on what they themselves had learned. They had their own inner judges, their own wounds, their own fears about not being good enough. In their attempt to prepare their child for the world, they unknowingly taught the child to be afraid of their own authentic nature. This is how the conditioning is passed from generation to generation, like an invisible inheritance that no one chooses to receive, but everyone learns to carry. Each generation tries to do better than the last, but until we become aware of this pattern, we continue to pass on the same wounds, the same fears, the same limiting beliefs about what it means to be human. The tragedy is not that this conditioning happened. The tragedy is that most people live their entire lives never realizing that they have a choice about it. But whether to believe what this inner judge tells them, they accept its voice as truth, its criticism as fact, its standards as law. They live as prisoners to a program they never chose to install and never learned they could change. But awareness is the beginning of freedom. When you begin to notice this voice, when you start to observe its patterns and question its authority, you take the first step toward reclaiming your power. You begin to see that you are not this voice. You are the one who can choose whether or not to listen to it. The inner judge operates on the principle that you must be perfect to be worthy of love. It has created a vision of who you should be, how you should act, what you should achieve, and what you should never do or say or think. This vision of perfection is like a carrot dangling in front of a horse, always just out of reach, always promising that if you could just reach it, you would finally be acceptable, finally be enough. But this vision of perfection is not your vision. It is a collection of images and ideas you absorbed from a world that is itself wounded and confused about what makes life meaningful. The standards your inner judge holds you to were created by people who were themselves struggling with their own sense of worthiness, their own fears, their own unhealed wounds. Think about the messages you received about what it means to be successful, attractive, intelligent, or good. These messages came from a society that has its own agreements about these things, agreements that are often based more on fear than on love, more on scarcity than on abundance, more on competition than on collaboration. Your inner judge learned these agreements and made them into laws that you must follow. It learned that you must look a certain way, achieve certain things, behave in certain ways, and never ever make mistakes or show weakness or be anything less than what others expect you to be. It learned that your worth as a human being depends on your ability to meet these standards, and it has been measuring you against them ever since. But what if these standards were never meant for you? What if the vision of perfection your judge holds you to is not a truth but a dream, a collective agreement that you never consciously chose to accept? What if the very pursuit of this kind of perfection is what keeps you from experiencing the joy, peace, and love that are your natural state? The dream of perfection is seductive because it promises that if you could just be perfect enough, you would finally be safe from criticism, rejection, or abandonment. It promises that if you could just meet all the standards, follow all the rules, and never make any mistakes, you would finally earn the love and acceptance you long for. But this is a false promise. No matter how close you come to this vision of perfection, the inner judge will always find something else that needs to be fixed, improved, or changed. It will always find new standards to meet, new ways you are falling short, new reasons why you are not yet worthy of unconditional love. This is because the judge does not understand unconditional love. It only understands conditional love, the kind of love that must be earned through performance, achievement, and meeting expectations. It does not know that love, real love, is not something you earn, but something you are. Not something you achieve, but something you remember. The standards of perfection your judge holds you to are like clothes that were made for someone else's body. They will never fit you properly because they were never designed for who you truly are. They were designed for an image, an idea, a dream of what someone else thought you should be. When you try to force yourself into these standards, you create suffering. You reject parts of yourself that are beautiful and natural because they do not match the image of who you think you should be. You hide your authentic thoughts, feelings, and desires because they do not seem perfect enough. You live in constant tension between who you are and who you think you should be. But you were never meant to be perfect according to someone else's definition. You were meant to be authentic, to be real, to be yourself. Your imperfections, your struggles, your unique way of seeing and being in the world are not flaws to be fixed, but gifts to be celebrated. The judge cannot see this because it has been trained to see only what is wrong, what is missing, what needs to be improved. It has been programmed to focus on problems rather than beauty, on lack rather than abundance, on fear rather than love. This is not its fault. This is simply how it learned to see the world. Notice how the voice in your head responds even as you consider these words. Does it argue? Does it insist that standards are necessary, that without judgment you would be lazy or irresponsible? Does it warn you that accepting yourself as you are would lead to mediocrity or failure? This is the voice of the conditioning, defending itself, trying to maintain its position as the authority in your life. It has been in control for so long that it fears what would happen if you stopped listening to its constant guidance and criticism. But what the judge does not understand is that there is a wisdom within you that is far more reliable than its harsh criticism. There is a voice of love that knows your true worth, a voice of truth that can guide you without punishment or fear. This voice has been there all along, waiting patiently for you to remember how to listen to it again. When you reject yourself, when you listen to the harsh voice of the inner judge and believe what it tells you about your worth, you are drinking poison and expecting it to nourish you. This poison of self-rejection seeps into every area of your life, coloring every experience with the bitter taste of unworthiness. Self-rejection is perhaps the most devastating wound a human being can carry, because it is a wound that you inflict upon yourself moment by moment, thought by thought. It is like having an enemy living inside your own mind, someone who knows all your vulnerabilities, all your fears, all your secret shames, and uses this knowledge to hurt you in the most precise and painful ways. When you reject yourself, you cannot truly accept love from others because you believe that if they really knew you, if they could see what you see when you look at yourself, they would reject you too. You become suspicious of kindness, uncomfortable with compliments, and convinced that any love you receive is based on a misunderstanding of who you really are. This creates a terrible loneliness, even when you are surrounded by people who care about you. You live behind a wall of self-protection, showing only the parts of yourself that you believe are acceptable, hiding the rest in shadow and shame. You become an actor in your own life, playing a role you think others will approve of, while your authentic self remains hidden and unexpressed. The poison of self-rejection also makes you hungry in ways that food cannot satisfy. You hunger for approval, for validation, for someone to tell you that you are good enough, worthy enough, lovable enough. But this hunger can never be satisfied from the outside, because the wound is on the inside. No amount of external validation can heal the damage you do to yourself with your own thoughts. You may spend your life trying to earn love through achievement, through service to others, through being perfect or helpful or indispensable. You may work harder than necessary, give more than you have, or sacrifice your own needs in the hope that this will finally prove your worth. But the inner judge is never satisfied with these efforts, because its job is not to acknowledge your worth, but to maintain the illusion that you must earn what you already are. The tragedy is that while you are rejecting yourself, you are also rejecting the very qualities that make you unique and beautiful. You judge your sensitivity as weakness, your creativity as impractical, your compassion as naivety. You try to fix or hide the very aspects of your nature that are gifts, not flaws. This self-rejection becomes a lens through which you see everything. When someone is kind to you, you wonder what they want. When someone loves you, you wait for them to discover your flaws and leave. When good things happen to you, you feel like you do not deserve them. When bad things happen, you feel like you do deserve them. You become your own worst enemy, the one person you can never escape, the one critic whose voice follows you everywhere. You carry this poison with you into every relationship, every opportunity, every moment of potential joy, and it turns sweetness bitter before you can taste it. But perhaps the most insidious aspect of self-rejection is how it spreads beyond you, like ripples in a pond. When you cannot accept yourself, you find it difficult to truly accept others. When you are harsh with yourself, you become harsh with others. When you reject parts of your own humanity, you reject those same parts in everyone around you. The inner judge that criticizes you so relentlessly does not limit its judgment to you alone. It extends its harsh gaze to everyone in your life, finding fault, measuring, comparing, and finding others lacking in the same ways it finds you lacking. Notice how when you are having a difficult day with yourself, when the inner judge is particularly active and critical, you also tend to be more irritated with others, more likely to notice their flaws, more impatient with their imperfections. This is not a coincidence. This is the judge projecting outward what it does inward. When you see someone and immediately notice what is wrong with them, what they are doing incorrectly, how they could be better, you are seeing them through the same lens through which you see yourself. The voice that tells you that person is too loud, too quiet, too confident, too insecure, too successful, too unsuccessful is the same voice that tells you these things about yourself. This projection is like looking in a funhouse mirror that distorts everything you see. The flaws you notice in others, the things that irritate or trigger you about them, are often reflections of the flaws you believe you have, the things you judge and reject about yourself. Think of someone who particularly annoys you, someone whose behavior or personality consistently bothers you. Now consider what it is about them that you find so irritating. Is it their arrogance, their neediness, their laziness, their perfectionism, their inability to make decisions, their tendency to interrupt? Whatever it is that bothers you about them, there is likely a part of you that either does the same thing or fears doing the same thing. The judge in your mind recognizes this quality because it has spent so much time criticizing it in you. It knows this territory well because it has mapped every inch of it within your own psyche. Sometimes the projection is obvious. You criticize someone for being selfish because you have been taught that selfishness is bad, and you constantly monitor yourself to make sure you are not being selfish. Sometimes the projection is more subtle. You judge someone for being too emotional because you have learned to suppress your own emotions, and their free expression of feeling reminds you of what you have denied in yourself. But projection can also work in reverse. Sometimes you judge people for having qualities you wish you had, but believe you cannot express. You criticize someone for being too confident because you wish you could be more confident, but your inner judge tells you that confidence is arrogance. You judge someone for being too carefree because you wish you could be more relaxed, but your judge tells you that relaxation is irresponsibility. In this way, your relationship with others becomes a battlefield where your inner conflicts play out. Instead of seeing people as they truly are, you see them through the filter of your own unresolved judgments about yourself. Instead of connecting with their authentic humanity, you relate to the projections of your own inner judge. This creates a world of separation and misunderstanding. Everyone becomes a threat or a disappointment, someone to compete with or someone to fix, someone to impress or someone to avoid. The possibility of genuine connection, of seeing and being seen, of loving and being loved without judgment becomes more and more remote. When you begin to understand this dynamic, you start to see that healing your relationship with yourself is not just a personal matter. It is a gift you give to everyone whose life touches yours. When you stop judging yourself so harshly, you naturally stop judging others so harshly. When you accept your own imperfections, you find it easier to accept the imperfections of others. The mirror of projection shows you that the world you see is largely a reflection of your inner world. The peace or conflict you experience with others mirrors the peace or conflict you experience within yourself. The love or fear you see in the world reflects the love or fear that lives in your own heart. This understanding can be both humbling and liberating. It is humbling because it means taking responsibility for how you see and interpret the world around you. It means acknowledging that your judgments of others say more about you than they do about them. But it is also liberating because it means you have the power to change your experience by changing your relationship with yourself. The beliefs that fuel your inner judge are like spells that were cast upon you when you were too young to resist them. Someone told you that you were not smart enough and you believed them. Someone showed you that love was conditional and you accepted this as truth. Someone taught you that your worth depended on your performance and you made this your reality. These beliefs feel so true, so much a part of who you are, that you may never have thought to question them. They have become the invisible foundation upon which you have built your entire sense of self. But what if these beliefs were never true? What if they were simply ideas that someone else believed and passed on to you? Consider the belief that you are not good enough. Where did this belief come from? Was it something you discovered about yourself through careful observation and reflection? Or was it something you learned from others who themselves had learned it from others before them? Think about the first time you remember feeling not good enough. You were probably quite young, maybe trying your best at something and being told it was not good enough, or seeing the disappointment in someone's eyes when you could not meet their expectations. In that moment, you made an agreement with this belief. You decided it was true. But you were just a child then, with a child's understanding of the world. You did not know that the person who seemed disappointed might have been having their own difficult day, carrying their own wounds, struggling with their own sense of not being good enough. You did not know that their response to you had more to do with their inner world than with any truth about your worth. You simply absorbed their energy, their judgment, their belief, and made it your own. You took on their limitation as if it were a fact about reality rather than an opinion colored by their own conditioning. This is how most limiting beliefs take root. They are not truths we discover, but lies we agree to believe. They are not insights about our nature, but infections we catch from a world that has forgotten its own divine worth. The belief that you must be perfect to be lovable is a lie. The belief that your mistakes define your worth is a lie. The belief that you are fundamentally flawed and need to be fixed is a lie. These beliefs may feel true because you have practiced believing them for so long, but feeling true and being true are not the same thing. Consider how these beliefs serve the inner judge. They keep you focused on what is wrong with you rather than what is beautiful about you. They keep you trying to earn what you already have, rather than simply receiving what is freely given. They keep you in a state of chronic dissatisfaction with yourself, always working towards some future moment when you will finally be acceptable. But what if you already are acceptable? What if you always have been? What if the love and worth you are seeking to earn through your efforts and achievements and perfection are already yours, have always been yours, and cannot be taken away no matter what you do or fail to do? The spell of unworthiness can only be broken by questioning its foundation. You must begin to examine these beliefs not as facts but as stories, not as truths but as agreements you made long ago when you knew no better. You must become curious about whether these stories still serve you, whether these agreements still reflect who you choose to be. This questioning is not an intellectual exercise, but a gentle inquiry into your own heart. It requires you to be honest about the cost of believing these limiting stories about yourself. It asks you to consider whether the voice that tells you that you are not enough could possibly be the voice of truth, wisdom, and love. When you begin to question these beliefs, you may feel resistance. The judge does not like to be questioned. It has been in charge for so long that it fears losing its authority. It may become louder, more insistent, more creative in its criticism. This is normal. This is how the old pattern tries to maintain itself. But you do not have to fight this resistance. You do not have to argue with the judge or try to silence it through force. You simply have to remember that you have a choice about what to believe, what to listen to, what to accept as true about yourself. The truth about you is not found in the voice of criticism, but in the voice of love. It is not found in the judgments of others, but in the wisdom of your own heart. It is not found in your achievements or failures, but in the simple fact of your existence, your inherent worth as a being of consciousness and love. The practice of self-compassion is like learning a new language, the language of love rather than the language of judgment. For so long you have spoken to yourself in the harsh tones of criticism, correction, and conditional acceptance. Now you must learn to speak to yourself the way you would speak to someone you love unconditionally. This practice begins with noticing when the inner judge speaks, when it tells you that you have failed or disappointed or fallen short. Instead of automatically believing what it says, you pause, you breathe, you remember that you have a choice about how to respond to this voice. Imagine that you have a small child living within you, a child who is sensitive and tender and doing their best to navigate a complex world. When this child makes a mistake, when they stumble or fall or do not understand something perfectly, how would you respond? Would you criticize them harshly? Would you tell them they are stupid or worthless or hopeless? Or would you offer them comfort, understanding, and gentle guidance? The part of you that suffers under the weight of self-judgment is like this child. It needs compassion, not criticism. It needs understanding, not harsh correction. It needs to know that it is loved, not because it is perfect, but because it exists. When you notice the judge speaking, you can respond with compassion. You can say gently, I hear that you are afraid I am not good enough. I understand that you are trying to protect me from rejection or failure. Thank you for caring about me, but I am choosing to speak to myself with love right now. This is not about fighting the judge or trying to destroy it. Fighting creates more conflict, more tension, more suffering. Instead, you acknowledge the judge with kindness while choosing not to be ruled by its voice. You treat it like a worried friend whose concerns you understand but whose advice you do not always need to follow. Self-compassion means speaking to yourself the way love speaks. It means offering yourself the same understanding you would offer a dear friend who was struggling. It means remembering that making mistakes is part of being human, that imperfection is not a flaw but a feature of the human experience. When you practice self-compassion, you begin to create a different internal environment. Instead of living in a climate of constant criticism, you begin to cultivate an atmosphere of acceptance and warmth. Instead of waking up each day to the voice that tells you what is wrong with you, you begin to hear the voice that reminds you of your inherent worth. This practice takes time because you are changing habits that have been forming for years or decades. You are rewiring patterns of thought that have become automatic. Be patient with yourself as you learn this new way of being. Even your impatience with your progress is an opportunity to practice compassion. Notice when you judge yourself for still judging yourself. Notice when you criticize yourself for not being compassionate enough. These moments are not failures, they are opportunities to practice the very compassion you are learning to cultivate. They are invitations to be gentle with yourself about being less than gentle with yourself. Self-compassion is not self-pity or self-indulgence. It is not making excuses for harmful behavior or avoiding responsibility for your choices. It is simply treating yourself with the same kindness and understanding that you would naturally offer to someone you love. It is recognizing that you are worthy of love not because of what you do, but because of what you are. As you practice speaking to yourself with compassion, you begin to remember something that you may have forgotten long ago. There is a voice within you that has always known your true worth. This voice has been there all along, waiting patiently beneath the noise of judgment and criticism, holding the truth of who you really are. This authentic voice does not speak in the language of should and must and have to. It does not compare you to others or measure you against impossible standards. It does not punish you for your humanity or demand that you be something other than what you are. Your authentic voice speaks in the language of truth, but it is a gentle truth, a loving truth, a truth that sees your beauty even in your imperfection. This voice knows that you are not broken and do not need to be fixed. It knows that you are not lacking and do not need to earn your worth. It knows that you are already whole, already complete, already enough. For many years, this voice may have been drowned out by the louder voice of the judge. The judge learned to speak early and learned to speak often, while your authentic voice learned to whisper or remain silent. But silence does not mean absence.